Mike, you had brought up China, and were you just bringing that up to kind of highlight hypocrisy, or did you actually have a position on China? Or do you think like Trump's more aggressive approach towards China makes sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I really brought up China as the hypocrisy, with how they look at dictatorships and authoritarian governments. Pretty much governments that are antithetical to freedom and the values that we have in the United States. I would say China is by far the biggest geopolitical threat. Um, you look at what's happening with Hong Kong, their aggression in the South China Sea, and their conflict with Taiwan, just their Belt and Roads Initiative, which a lot of people don't talk about. Nobody wants to talk about the Belt and Roads Initiative, right? When we hit the year 2049, that will be the 100-year anniversary of the Communist Chinese Revolution. And by that time, their goal is to be the most powerful, influential country in the world. Well, as a United States freedom-loving individual, I have a big problem with China already having so much influence in the United States. We're talking about what's going on with the NBA. Like, you need to fire somebody that we don't like. And the fact that people would actually take that seriously, the fact that Hollywood has to change movies and all that stuff because of they want to make money in China. So China understands how to, have influence in the world. The way that they're like colonizing different parts of the world and spreading their ideology, I think it's very dangerous.
I mean, this is somewhere where I absolutely agree with you. I mean, America is kind of the greatest country in the world fighting for freedom, and China is the main rival. It's almost the new Soviet Union. So, I mean, there was almost a period between the fall of the Soviet Union, kind of between 1990 and I don't want to give an exact year, but you could perhaps say the financial crisis, perhaps a bit later, where it seemed like the West had won. It seemed like the kind of the liberal democratic model. And when I say liberal, I mean in kind of small state terms,
Sure.
not in terms of the classically liberal, democratic, freedom-loving capitalist model had won. It didn't really face any serious ideological adversaries. So obviously there were countries that didn't subscribe to the same value system, like Russia, but they were kind of seen as being quite backwards and weak. What's happening now, which I think is quite scary, is that authoritarian countries, dictatorial countries with very different models, I mean, China is the best example, are becoming very powerful, almost to the point where, like the Soviet Union, they can challenge the free world again. And I do appreciate Trump taking a tough line on China. Generally, I think that he's right to recognize them as the main strategic threat to the United States and indeed to the free world as a whole. And the way that the Chinese government behaves, as you said, in Hong Kong, in the South China Sea, I mean, amongst some of their own minority populations. So at the moment, there's something like, they estimate there's about 1 million Uyghurs, which is a kind of an ethnic group who live in eastern China in re-education camps. I mean, it's just horrendous where kind of torture and abuse and rape are reported to be widespread. So I completely agree with Trump taking a firm line on China. My only slight issue with it is that sometimes I feel it's overly economic. So I get that China's trade practices are not fair. That's a completely valid point. But at the same time, where possible, I prefer to maintain free trade. And I think that some of Trump's tariffs they undermine the kind of the flow of the free market, if that makes sense. So I completely agree with him cracking down on China. That's great. I'm 100% behind him on that. I'm just a little bit nervous about some of the economic tariffs he's put on and whether they're anti-competitive and whether that's actually going to undermine the kind of the free market system, which we should be trying to defend.
Mm-hmm. Well, as it relates to what you said, like you think Trump kind of undermines the free market and the flow of trade and everything with the tariffs.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, why is he doing this? Why are we even in this situation if not for previous leaders selling us out, without jobs going overseas, without the deterioration of American cities, the Rust Belt? A lot of people lost their jobs, their livelihoods because of bad trade deals with China. So all Trump is trying to do is right the wrong. He's trying something different. When everything else fails, try something different. And we don't know how this is all going to play out. I have my own theory that I think China's holding out until after the 2020 election because they have a vested interest in how it plays out, which tells you again why Trump was so necessary. The Chinese government probably thinks, well, Joe Biden would just get us back to the status quo, which we would be winning, which would be back on track to our 2049 goal. Whereas Trump represents a fly in the ointment. Trump was like the brakes, like, wait, we're going to do something different, right? So what he's doing is necessary. It needs to be done. Somebody needed to stand up to China, and we finally have a president that's doing it.
I mean, I think you made a really, really interesting point. I mean, I think you almost highlighted kind of one of the main divisions within global conservatism. So there's the ultra free market view, which is that all free trade is good and we should trade wherever we can on whatever basis we can. And there's the more nationalist view, which is that we have to sometimes protect our own industries with tariffs. I incline slightly more to the first view. I think that free trade, in the same way that free markets within a country create prosperity. Capitalism and people starting their own businesses and the government just generally getting out of people's way. I think that's a great way of producing wealth within a country. I think the same thing works on a global scale. So I think the more people you have who can kind of do business with each other and the less government intervention getting in the way in terms of things like tariffs, the better. I do accept, though, and you make a very good point here, that some of the trade practices that countries like China use were appalling, and they were stealing a lot of American intellectual property. And I sympathise with Trump for cracking down. I just slightly think he might have gone a little bit too far. And I just like to see him spending more time kind of advocating the free market ethos, the kind of the freedom ethos. So if he does have to put tariffs in place to counter a particularly bad Chinese practice in one area, I can totally understand that, but I'd really like it if he then made it clear that that's only because China's misbehaving in this one area, and that generally he's fully in favour of free markets, of free trades, of the capitalist model. Obviously, Trump's a capitalist, but yeah. I would like to see the kind of the global economic policy more aligned along those lines. And if he does have to put some tariffs in, which I accept he does have to do, I'd like to still see him combine that with making a strong general case for free markets.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm not for free trade. I definitely am for free trade, but I think every once in a while the terms need to be renegotiated, and we're basically in the middle of a renegotiation where sometimes negotiations are tough. You have to walk away from the table. You got to know when to hold them and when to fold them, right? As they say, that cliche statement. It's kind of like that. That's kind of where we are with everything. I can't really speak too much to the tariffs. I don't really understand the nuances of tariffs other than when I worked in corporate retail, and that's pretty much it. But I think there's probably other options. I think that especially as it relates to like big tech and Silicon Valley, the way they've sold out the country, they've shipped a bunch of jobs overseas. Like think about American companies that have vested interests in the Chinese government, like Nike, with their cheap labor that they get over there. Why aren't there more incentives for these American companies to go to other countries or to bring jobs back home? The ones that they can actually, have here. I don't think we can necessarily manufacture Nike tennis shoes in America. We could maybe, but that's neither here nor there. I would like to see more government hands-off, maybe as it relates to taxes or incentives for companies to move home, which is a roundabout way to weaken the leverage of China, right? Because when you're negotiating, a lot of it has to do with leverage. Who has the leverage? I think the United States has more leverage than China. We have a bigger economy. We're their biggest customer, right? But they're not our only supplier. So we have options there. And I think Trump recognizes that. And the very fact that Trump's even trying to do anything tells me that he actually does care. And that's why it pisses me off that you have so many fake conservatives and people who don't truly care about the United States' best interest attacking and criticizing him instead of getting behind him. They should be behind him 100% of the way if they truly care about the interest of the American public.